There's a shift that happens in certain empaths that's so profound, so fundamentally transformative, that the people around them can't quite put their finger on what's changed. The empath still listens, they still care, they still show up for the people who deserve it. But something in their energy has completely transmuted. They're no longer the person who absorbs everyone's pain. They're no longer the emotional dumping ground. They're no longer available for dynamics that require their diminishment. And the people who knew them before can sense it immediately. The empath hasn't just healed, they've evolved into something else entirely. Carl Jung spent years studying this transformation, and what he discovered was that a small percentage of empaths don't just recover from their wounds, they alchemize them into a form of power that makes them fundamentally different from who they were before. They become what Jung called the integrated empath, and once this evolution happens, there's no going back. Today, I'm going to show you what this evolution looks like, why it only happens to certain empaths, and how you'll know if you're in the middle of this transformation right now. Jung observed something remarkable in his most empathic patients. Most of them would heal, set boundaries, build healthier lives, but a select few would undergo something that went beyond healing. They would develop what he called psychological immunity. They could walk into the same toxic dynamics that once destroyed them and remain completely unaffected. Not because they'd built walls, but because they'd become something those dynamics couldn't penetrate anymore. The evolution happened in a moment Jung described as the point of no return. The moment when the empath stopped seeing their empathy as something sacred they needed to preserve and started seeing it as a resource they needed to protect. Before this moment, the empath operates from a fundamental belief that their empathy is their greatest gift to the world. That feeling deeply is their purpose, that their ability to hold space for others is what makes them valuable. And this belief, while beautiful, keeps them trapped in a cycle of depletion. After this moment, everything inverts. The empath realizes that their empathy isn't a gift they owe to everyone, it's a power they get to choose how to use. That feeling deeply doesn't obligate them to feel for people who don't reciprocate. That holding space for others is only meaningful when those others respect the space they're being given. Jung called this the moment of sovereign discernment. The empath stops being empathic indiscriminately and becomes strategically empathic instead. What makes this evolution so powerful is that it doesn't diminish the empath's capacity to feel. If anything, they feel more deeply than before. But they've developed something most empaths never acquire: the ability to feel without absorbing, to witness without becoming, to care without carrying. Jung noticed this showed up in specific ways. The evolved empath could sit with someone in tremendous pain and offer genuine compassion without taking that pain home with them. They could listen to someone's crisis without feeling responsible for solving it. They could see someone making destructive choices without feeling compelled to intervene. They'd developed what Jung called energetic sovereignty. Their emotional state was no longer hostage to everyone else's chaos. To understand why this evolution is so rare, you need to see what prevents most empaths from reaching it. The barrier isn't lack of healing or insufficient boundaries. The barrier is identity. Most empaths have built their entire sense of self around being the person who helps, who understands, who sacrifices for others. To evolve beyond that requires dismantling the very identity that's kept them safe. Because being needed feels like being loved. Being useful feels like being valued. Being the one who gives endlessly feels like having purpose. The evolution requires the empath to confront a terrifying question: who am I if I'm not the person who saves everyone? Jung found that most empaths never ask this question. They stay locked in the helper role because the alternative feels like ego death. And in a way, it is. The old self, the one who believed their worth was tied to their availability, has to die for the new self to emerge. But for the empaths who dare to ask this question, who dare to sit in the void of not knowing who they are without their compulsive caretaking, something extraordinary happens. They discover a self that exists independent of their utility to others, a self that has value simply by existing, a self that doesn't need to earn love through service. And once they've found that self, they become untouchable. The evolved empath develops abilities that Jung documented extensively. They develop instant pattern recognition. They can assess a relationship's health in the first 5 minutes of interaction. They can spot manipulation before it's fully formed. They can sense when someone is performing vulnerability to gain access rather than sharing it to build connection. They develop what Jung called the observer's position. They can be in a dynamic without being of it. They can participate in conversations without getting emotionally entangled. They can be present without being permeable. But perhaps most significantly, they develop absolute clarity about their non-negotiables. And this is where the evolution becomes visible to others. The evolved empath doesn't negotiate boundaries. They don't explain them, defend them, or apologize for them. They simply enforce them with a calm, unmovable certainty that stops manipulators in their tracks. Someone tries the guilt tactic that used to work perfectly, and it just doesn't land. Someone attempts the crisis that used to get immediate attention, and the evolved empath responds with compassion but zero rescue energy. Someone deploys the emotional manipulation that used to create chaos, and the evolved empath sees it so clearly, it's almost boring. Jung observed that this clarity terrifies people who are used to empaths being malleable, because a sovereign empath can't be controlled, guilted, or manipulated. They've become too conscious, too discerning, too solid in themselves. What makes this evolution permanent is that it's not a state the empath is maintaining through effort. It's who they've become at a cellular level. They haven't trained themselves to set boundaries. They've embodied boundaries. They haven't learned to protect their energy. They've become someone whose energy is naturally protected because they no longer broadcast the signal that says, "Use me." Jung noticed that evolved empaths often go through a period where they seem almost alien to the people who knew them before. Family members say they've changed, become cold, lost their warmth. Friends claim they're not the same person anymore. And they're right. The evolved empath isn't the same person. They're not cold, they're clear. They haven't lost their warmth. They've stopped setting themselves on fire to provide it. What Jung found most fascinating was that this evolution creates a kind of energetic repulsion to toxicity. The evolved empath doesn't have to actively avoid toxic people. Toxic people naturally fall away because there's nothing for them to hook into anymore. The empath is no longer seeking validation they can withhold, no longer afraid of abandonment they can threaten, no longer confused by gaslighting they can deploy, no longer destabilized by chaos they can create. The evolved empath has become psychologically self-sufficient in a way that makes them fundamentally incompatible with dysfunction. If you're in the middle of this evolution, you're probably experiencing something that feels disorienting. You're noticing that relationships that used to consume you now feel almost irrelevant. You're watching people try tactics that used to devastate you. And you're feeling curious detachment rather than emotional activation. You're realizing that you're not trying to be less empathic. You're just becoming more selective about where your empathy goes. And that selectivity isn't cruelty, it's consciousness. Jung would tell you that what you're experiencing is the rarest form of psychological development. You're not just healing from trauma, you're transmuting it into immunity. You're not just setting boundaries, you're becoming someone who doesn't attract boundary violations in the first place. The evolution completes when you realize you're no longer an empath trying to protect yourself from the world. You're a sovereign being who happens to feel deeply, and you've learned to use that depth as power rather than letting it be used against you. You haven't lost your empathy. You've weaponized your discernment. You haven't become cold, you've become untouchable. You haven't closed your heart. You've just stopped opening it to people who see vulnerability as opportunity. This is what Jung meant when he described the individuated self. You're no longer half of something waiting to be completed by external validation. You're a whole universe that allows carefully chosen people to orbit you, but only if they respect your gravity. You're not who you were. You're who you were always meant to become, and that person is something else entirely. Welcome to the evolution. Welcome to sovereign empathy. Welcome to the version of yourself that can hold the depths without drowning in them. You've stopped being the empath everyone could use, and you've become the empath no one can touch.